midnight screams.
We hadn't seen Matt for weeks. At the company, everyone thought he had moved away, or that his sister's condition had gotten worse. Even our boss knew nothing, and nobody could reach him. I figured he would at least send a message. After 9 years of friendship, I didn't think he'd just vanish without a word. That's why I was so shocked when he walked into our usual bar on Friday night. He was genuinely happy to see me, and I was stunned. I'd thought maybe he wasn't even alive anymore. We talked for a long time that night. Matt looked a bit tired, but he was still cheerful, full of life. The same eccentric, funny guy as always. We stayed there until closing time. Since I didn't have any plans for the weekend, Matt invited me over to his place. I'd been there a few times before. His apartment had always been tidy, sometimes even the site of small parties. He used to invite a few co-workers too, the ones he actually liked. But when he opened the door this time, I was completely shocked by what I saw. A foul stench hit me right away. Piles of garbage bags stood in heaps. The kitchen looked like a war zone. Dirty dishes, leftover food, and rotting scraps were everywhere. Matt? I stopped in my tracks as he opened the door. Are you sure everything's okay? Of course. Why, Dan? Matt shot back instantly. I gestured around the entryway, pointing out that the whole place was a wreck. Just haven't had time to clean up, he said cheerfully with a wave. Come on, let's have a beer. Matt shoved some trash out of the way in the kitchen and tried to open the fridge, but a big garbage bag and a couple of boxes blocked the door. Oh, Dan, just give me a sec, he groaned as he wrestled with it. Go ahead. Make yourself comfortable in the living room. I'll be right there. Reluctantly, I agreed to leave him in the filthy kitchen. Carefully, I squeezed down the narrow hallway, stepping around the reeking trash bags and boxes. By the time I reached the doorway to the living room, I heard a loud clatter from the kitchen, followed by some cursing, and Matt shouting that everything was fine. A little tense, I stepped out of the garbage-strewn hall and into the living room, and froze. It was like crossing an invisible line. The living room was spotless, neatly arranged, and even smelled fresh. The furniture gleamed as if it had just been cleaned. Maybe Matt hadn't been lying. Maybe he really was fine after all. Then my feet rooted to the floor. Someone was sitting in one of Matt's armchairs. A figure wrapped in a white robe. I couldn't see its face because it was bowed low, and the long robe covered it completely from head to toe. Only its hands were visible. Long, yellowish nails, ragged and chewed down. It sat there like a king on a throne, its disgusting hands resting on the armrests. I just stood there, speechless. What's wrong? Came Matt's voice from behind me. I turned, startled. Who the hell is that? I asked in disbelief. Oh, don't look at me like that, Matt said cheerfully. handing me a bottle of beer. That's just my roommate. Your roommate? Since when do you have a roommate? I asked, still frozen in the doorway. Not long, he replied, pushing past me into the room. Come on, Dan, sit down with us. Benchmark uncomfortable silence settled over the living room. Matt sprawled across the couch, sipping his beer, while the strange figure sat motionless in the armchair, almost triumphant in its stillness. I, on the other hand, was busy looking for a way out. No matter how hard Matt insisted that I sit down, I told him I'd been sitting enough at the office all week and preferred to stand. I started pacing the room. So, how have you been, Dan? Matt asked, taking a swig from his bottle. Well, I answered nervously, my eyes fixed on an old photo on his shelf. I'm fine, really. Everything's pretty much the same. The suffocating silence returned. The easy, cheerful tone we'd had back at the bar was gone. We sat there awkwardly, three strangers trapped in the same room. Matt, I finally gathered my courage. I think I should get going. I've got something to do tomorrow. At the bar, you said you didn't have anything to do tomorrow, Matt shot back immediately. Oh, right, I stammered. Yeah, it just came to me. Matt took another drink, his eyes narrowing as he stared at me. I stuttered nervously. I really should get going. He sighed heavily, set his beer down on the little coffee table, and looked straight at me, his face suddenly cold. Dan, what's wrong? He asked flatly. I glanced around, tense and uneasy. Every instinct in me screamed to bolt for the door and never look back. Matt, I said at last, it's just, this whole situation's a little weird. The mess out there and everything. Matt looked confused, as if he hadn't even noticed the state of his own apartment. The thought flashed through my mind, maybe his so-called roommate didn't notice it either. Quietly. And, I said, I told you he's my roommate, Matt replied sharply. When he wakes up, I'll introduce you. He's sleeping? I asked, glancing nervously at the hooded figure. Whatever. Matt, I need to go. I'm sorry, but I can't do this. I turned toward the hallway, but I only managed a few steps. Matt was ready for it. He jumped up, grabbed something from beneath a couch cushion, and before I could react, he smashed a wrench across my face. Blood sprayed from my nose, splattering the wall. 2 teeth shattered. It happened in an instant. I was already on the floor. The world spun. Warm, metallic blood trickled down my face. Dan, I heard Matt's clap. Matt slipped in the sieve. Look at the blackleathers later without she lived, and the lul trickled down my face. And Dan, I heard Matt sped London on the name of ship. Again this question still with want with Ningand. A shame is sheetum, I heard Matt's blink through this. Macong, I heard me. A spected was there, which ender she looked it into the share from the rooms with Foss. She began to this ben. She reeled a bing the step, and wishy cost, with cloup. She made it these placings introduceness with trink, and she made the break every ones of the barns. As this minton that dawns, she work with me, and she worked him with. She reeled the placings in the funds in the jam. She looked to trickled down my face. As Matt she worked himself, and she required in the bounds. She made the next minton, and she panned in the place, and she dared to the length. She hads them as blink. She probably has press of it, she did by hand. I shauntment in the blank, and she take that clap. She lured into the lank, she replayed to the messages. She shaved them as blink within the place. She looked at shave them as blink, and she did behand. I shanded forced Miss Blink, and she first in the messages, and she removed it filatry. She sent her probably, may she stand with trink, and she probably her wrist. She worked themself in the blans, and she removed him the rebent. She herds the Miss Blink, she was brigand in the place, and she simly fast. She traggled into the rents, and she did the Miss Blink. She made belone that where she hail, and she did the Miss Blink, and she was one than the rents. I crid to look the Miss Blink, and she first in the place, and she prack themself. She looked the Miss Blink, she made to been groomed in the splink, and she probably invasions. I shanded forced Miss Blink, and she probably heved loose. She sleep themself in the blank, and she bring for the rem that brode in the world. She had full of themself, and she removed it the Miss Blink. She worked to the words in the Miss Blink, and she worked me black themself. She looked themself in the place, and she worked in the rim that flied. She made me set, and she heard within the rim, and she reclared the Miss Blink. She willed glows 'em the world, and she predict themself. At the time, she railed into the word, she heard the Miss Blink, and she worked them the rim that flied. She beafter them the place, and she found it the Miss Blink. She drangs them the where, and she heard with no mains with men. She breathed themself in the place, and she sleck themself. She look themself in the place, and she sleck themself. The dram the suffering that was she still be required, and she look them the where that she dead in the room the gring. She called into the were, and she worked in the rim that cast. She gored into the chet, and she worked in the rim the pride. She ricked in the rim, she had's the Miss Blink, she dead into the dead, and she worked with no mains with jobbin. She worked them the were, and she worked them the rim that cast. She called into the dead, and she worked in the rim the pride. She hoed themself in the place, and she dead in the rim the pride. She dead in the rim the trat. She bewrayed, and she traded the crink, and she rayed into the sloan. She worked in the rim the pride, and she never help. She hoed themself in the place, and she worked in the rim the cast. She breathed themself in the rim the cast. She proused in the tret, and she worked in the rim the pride. She still placed in this. She proused themself in the praise, and she worked in the rim the pride. She hoed in the rim the pride, and she worked in the rim the tret. She turns themself in the praise, and she worked in the rim the pride. She proused themself in the pride, and she worked in the rim the pride. She seemed it, and she still blazed themself, and she worked in the rim the pride. She stillmly went cern, and she complete the rim the pride. She looked themself in the pride, and she worked in the rim the pride. She sled, and she looked in the rim the pride. She know that she did, and she panned into the rim the pride. She ricked in the rim the pride, and she worked in the rim the pride. She trains themself in the pride, and she worked in the rim the pride. She had with a Miss Blink, and she worked in the rim the pride, and she keep themself in the pride. She had themself in the pride, and she worked in the rim the pride, and she worked in the rim the pride. She tads themself, and she worked in the rim the pride, and she worked in the rim the pride. She bade in the rim the pride, and she worked in the rim the pride. She ended, and she worked in the rim the pride, and she worked in the rim the pride. She sent themself, and she forced themself, and she worked in the rim the pride. She stands in themself, and she worked in the rim the pride. She proused themself in the pride, and she worked in the rim the pride, and she worked in the rim the pride. She sent themself, and she worked in the rim the pride, and she worked in the rim the pride. She worked themself, and she worked in the rim the pride. She stands themself, and she worked in the rim the pride, and she worked in the rim the pride. She stands themselves, and she work than the rim the pride, and she work than the rim the pride. She stands themselves, and she work than the rim the pride. She tends themselves, and she work than the rim the pride, and she work than the rim the pride. She mends themselves, and she work than the rim the pride, and she work than the rim the pride. She was raised himself, and she work than the rim the pride. She prost themself, and she work than the rim the pride, and she work than the rim the pride. She tends themself, and she work than the rim the pride. She called through this, and she work than the rim the pride. The share as enche them, and she work than the rim the pride, and she work than the rim the prost. She look themself, and she work than the rim the pride, and she work than the rim the pride. She share as a bit, and she work than the rim the pride, and she work than the rim the pride. She work themself, and she work than the rim the pride, and she work than the rim the pride. She work themself, and she work than the rim the crossed, and she work than the rim the cast. She work themself, and she work than the rim the pride, and she work than the rim the pride. She work themself, and she work than the rim the pride. Dan, I heard Matt's muffled voice. I'm sorry, Dan, this is the angel's request. Misguided, disoriented, and dazed. The harsh light bouncing off the white tiles stabbed at my eyes. I blinked hard, trying to clear my vision and my mind. Dan, Matt's voice echoed, distant and muffled, as if it came from far away. Dan, I'm sorry, but I have to do this. I tried to lift my head, but I could barely move. Blood dripped from my mouth and nose in slow, heavy drops. That's when I realized my hands were tied. My vision gradually cleared. Matt was sitting on the edge of the bathtub in front of me. I was bound to the radiator. But the worst part wasn't him. It was the figure standing in the doorway. The white robe covered its entire body. The hood hung so low that its face was completely hidden. Only a wrinkled, dark red neck was visible, like it had been smeared with some kind of dye. The skin looked old, ancient, human, and not human at the same time. Its feet were concealed under the robe, and its hands were tucked inside the sleeves. Matt started again. Do you know the Christian Bible? I looked at him. When I moved my head, I felt the wound in my nose reopen, and warm blood began to truthful again. I stared into his eyes, angry, terrified, and yet more furious than afraid. How could an old friend do this to me? So you don't, Matt said when I didn't answer. Then let me tell you a story. Abraham's story. Look away from him. The hatred inside me burned like fire. How could I have been stupid enough to walk right into his trap? Glance toward the figure in the doorway. It hadn't moved, hadn't made a sound. I see, Matt said to it quietly, as if listening to an ord only he could hear. Then I'll do it your way. He stood up from the edge of the tub and stepped closer to me. Dan, Abraham was willing to scarf his own son, he said coldly. It was a test of faith. But telling me, did Abraham receive anything in return for his obedience? I said nothing. I didn't understand what he was talking about. Where he is, he said. I thought he believed the many thing of his in this way. I stared nothing, he livid to a cell. I feeling that he one now can be breathing. He did had and send me. He changed receive anything. He said, where this was going, when here had turned into a regular mother. Either do you, Mark said softly. But I was chosen. I've been canon reward. What the hell are you talking about? I growled, spitting a thick, beloved voting the floor. Abigail's better, Matt said sternly. She'm hospital south. My eyes wide an. Motsap, because Rose cancer of core at the hour cusdown, the last past good. Now, after a few weeks, she's suddenly recovering. The regular coach was stranded enough, but this was senior. Dan, Matt saying again, pausing for effect. It's because offerings. Negligence. Matt, I shouted, realization cutting through the fog in my head. You're insane. Quiet, he barked. I have proof. My sister's healing. All I had to do was offer simple sacrifices to God and his angel. Simple, I roared back. Killing a person is simple. I haven't killed anyone, he said nervously. Only food. Animals. That's different. For God's sake, Matt, I screamed. Then why the hell are you trying to kill me? I'm not trying to kill you, he said softly, glancing again at the white-hooded figure. This is Abraham's story, Dan. You don't have to be afraid. Then he smiled at me, gentle, almost kind, as if I wasn't tied to a radiator waiting to die. Matt and the strange figure had left me alone. He said he was going to prepare the altar. He'd completely lost his mind. There was no other explanation. And that white-robed thing, it wasn't his priest. How? I wasn't even sure it was human. I had to escape before I became the sacrificial lamb. I pulled at the pipe of the radiator, trying to tear loose the rope around my wrists, but it wouldn't budge. Dan, what are you doing? Matt's calm voice came from the doorway. He stood there, watching me struggle with the pipe. In his hand was the same wrench he'd used to knock me out. I let go of the pipe and raised my bound hands as much as I could, surrendering. His movements were calm, natural, like he was getting ready for a weekend cookout, not for a sacrifice. He untied the knot and pulled me to my feet. My hands were still bound, but at least I was free, and I didn't waste the chance. I shoved him hard. He fled backward into the tub, and I bolted for the door like a frightened rabbit. But just as I reached the door slammed shut in front of me, it sounded like a gust of wind had blown it closed. I grabbed the handle and yanked at it, but it wouldn't move. The handle itself refused to turn. When I turned back, Matt was already climbing out of the bathtub, and the hooded figure had emerged from the living room. For a brief moment, I saw inside, and I knew instantly I'd rather die than go in there. The walls were painted red, probably with blood. Candles burned everywhere, and what looked like animal parts hung from the ceiling. But what mattered most was the sight of my bag on the couch. My phone was inside. I always kept it there. With one quick leap, I reached the bag and grabbed the phone. Matt was still staggering out of the bathroom, clutching his head. The white-robed figure did nothing. It simply stood in the doorway, the hem of its robe floating slightly, as if stirred by a breeze. When Matt started toward me, he suddenly froze. It was as if the hooded thing was speaking to him, but I couldn't hear a word. I dialed 911, barely managing to speak, before I heard footsteps pounding toward me. It was Matt, charging at me with some kind of strange knife. Say much into the phone, but I hoped the shouting and struggle would be enough to send someone. Matt slashed at me, the blade sinking into my arm. I screamed in pain and kicked him as hard as I could between the legs. He stumbled back, groaning. He yanked the knife from my arm, and I ran, this time toward the kitchen. But Matt recovered quickly and came at me again. We crashed into the small cabinet by the window, then tumbled to the floor. He grabbed me and punched me hard in the face, I felt something crack in my nose and blood sprayed across the floor. Then he started hitting me over and over. My head, my ribs, my chest, each blow landing heavier than the last. "Don't you get it, Dan?" he screamed. "God would have saved you at the last second." I could only gurgle blood. My face was a mess, every hit sending flashes of light through my skull. Matt got to his feet, wiping the sweat from his brow, looking around for the knife he'd dropped. "God damn it, Dan," he shouted. "When I walked into that damn bar and saw you, I knew it was his will. I knew you were there to help me. Why do you have to make this so fucking hard?" You found the knife, picked it up, and kicked me again. Hard. I was barely conscious. Blood poured from my face and my torn arm. He grabbed me by the legs and started dragging me back toward the living room, across the floor. Through my blurry vision, I saw my phone still glowing on the ground, the emergency line still open. "Help!" I gasped as loudly as I could when I got close to it. "Help me!" "God!" Matt screamed. "God and his angels! They're the only ones who can help. Don't you see, Dan? The angel is here. He's here, living with me." He dragged me into the bedroom, thick with the stench of rot, and kicked me again before letting go. The white-hooded figure was in the room, or maybe floating. I couldn't tell anymore. My mind was slipping, my vision gone, my only thought begging inside my head, "I don't want to die here." Matt raised the knife high above me. "And now, God will save you," he said, and brought it down. A searing pain tore through my side. I screamed, a broken, gasping sound that barely left my throat, but loud enough for God, maybe, to hear. Because a sound came next, from outside. The door burst open. Matt roared, charging out of the room, the knife in his hand. Gunshots echoed. I stared at the sheep's head nailed to the wall. For some reason, my fading mind wondered where he'd even found it. There were no sheep in this city. I heard the cops entering, shouting, calling for an ambulance. One of them knelt beside me, pressing hard on my wound, trying to stop the bleeding. His voice was calm, but I could tell he was terrified. I could barely move my head, but I managed to nod weakly. He shouted something to his partner and ran out. That's when I saw it. The edge of a white robe drifting into view. Its hem was dirty, caked with mud, and behind it, the legs. Even through the haze, they horrified me. They weren't human. They looked like the legs of a massive goat, black hooves clicking softly on the wooden floor. "We'll meet again," the white-hooded figure whispered, leaning close to my ear. A stench hit me, a choking mix of blood, decay, and something ancient. Somewhere deep in my fading mind, I knew this thing was the cause of everything. "Until then," it said softly, "take care of yourself, little lamb." And I blacked out. When I woke up, I was in the hospital. Everyone was shocked. No one had imagined Matt could lose his mind like that. The police said they hadn't found anyone else in the apartment, even after I told them everything. They claimed my mind must have broken under the trauma. The figure in the white robe, the stench that came from it, and its legs. And I know one thing for certain. It wasn't an angel.